The thing that I find very strange about basketball now is that, the players are now getting paid while they're in college, and it seems like they're staying in college instead of 4 years. I mean, 7 years later, they're still playing ball.
They are, and there's a lot of examples of that, Hammer. In fact, even in the NC2A this year, a lot of these guys that would be, quote, the best players, they have been at a lot of different schools, and they've transferred through the portal. And because of the name, image, and likeness, they're now allowed to get paid, and they are making a lot of money. So there's a tendency for them to stick around a little bit longer.
Hey guys, it's an exciting time of the year, March Madness. We're down to the Final Four. We've got the Huskies, the Boilermakers, Crimson Tide, and the Wolfpack. What do you think?
The Tide's going out in Alabama. They better be glad they got a basketball team, because the football team is going to be in terrible shape next year.
Guys, something real important. We've got Richard Kuch in here. He, in 1978, coached a small basketball team called Notre Dame at the NCAA Finals. Good to see you, Coach.
Well, it's always it's great to see you. It's great to be back. Yeah, that period of time in 1978, I was an assistant coach for Dick Phelps, and we went to the Final Four. And it's been a while, but it's the only time that Notre Dame has ever played in the Final Four in basketball.
Because Coach.
No, and I think maybe it might be the reason. I like it. Actually, the real reason was that team had some great players on it. Bill Lambier and Kelly Tripucka, Rich Branning. They had Stan Wilcox, and just a lot of guys that wound up playing in the NBA. And I can still remember to this day, we played Duke in the first game and got beat. And I remember the ball sitting on the rim. A guy by the name of Duck Williams took it. It didn't go down, and all of a sudden we were playing in a consolation game, which was the last consolation game that was played in the NC2A the next night.
That can't be any fun, being a consolation game,
It wasn't any fun, to be honest about it. It was hard to get everybody going, including the coaches. But you know what took over? People were competitive. You know that. You were involved in sports in your young life, and when people start getting after it a little bit, everybody gets a little bit more competitive, and all of a sudden the juices start flowing, and you're into the game.
It's just about that game at that time.
Yeah.
So how are you feeling about who's going to be the strongest team this year? Who's going to come through? I mean, two of them, one of them has won 5 times, right? One of them has won twice, and then 2 of them have never won anything.
Right. And probably the team that is rated the best, overall, is the University of Connecticut. Of course, they were national champions last year, and they've got a great group of players and have had a great season, as each of the teams have had a great season to make it through the tournament. Now, my wife went to Purdue. I don't know if you know that or not. So it's hard
Georgia.
for me. I'm going to go to the game, and it's very difficult not to say, let's go Boilermakers, let's go Purdue. So
Sure.
They've got a tremendous player, 7'4" kid that's really good.
You might be getting your ass kicked if you're not saying that.
No, absolutely.
We know how that goes. But it didn't, they played San Diego last year, right? And they pretty much whooped San Diego pretty good.
They did. And Connecticut is the one team of the 4 that you mentioned that has gone through the tournament this year where they've won the games by like 25, 28, 27, 30. So they've actually dominated everybody they played against. And they did that last year in the finals. And I think the fact that, if you've been there before, it really helps you out as a player.
Do they have a lot of the same players?
Yes, they do.
Okay, so they're a young team.
They were a young team last year. They've added some pieces that, and they lost a couple guys, but basically a lot of their players have had the experience of being there.
The thing that I find very strange about basketball now is that, the players are now getting paid while they're in college, and it seems like they're staying in college instead of 4 years. I mean, 7 years later, they're still playing ball.
They are, and there's a lot of examples of that, Hammer. There's, in fact, even in the NC2A this year, a lot of these guys that would be, quote, the best players, they have been at a lot of different schools, and they've transferred through the portal. And because of the name, image and likeness, they're now allowed to get paid, and they are making a lot of money. So there's a tendency for them to stick around a little bit longer.
Coach, how do you feel about the NIL?
I don't like it. Ed, once the cat is out of the bag, and
It's
people
over.
were starting to make money, it would be very, very difficult. And probably the biggest problem is when I coached, and not too long ago, even after I coached, you couldn't buy a kid a hamburger, without it being a violation. And now that's gone from not buying a kid a hamburger to a guy making $900,000 or.
Do you want a Ferrari?
Yeah. And probably in recruiting, instead of asking about what the dorms are like, or how's the food at the cafeteria, kids want to know how much money am I going to make, NLI money. And I think you've seen like Saban leave coaching.
Yeah.
You've seen Jay Wright leave coaching. I'm not saying that's specifically the reason, and I'm not saying they would say that that's the reason, but I think it's got to be part of the equation.
Well, Nick Saban just testified in front of Congress about how it's going to ruin NCAA sports.
I agree with that, but the thing is, it ruins it because all of a sudden it becomes a professional game, and you're buying players.
But here's something that, Kuch, that you told me is that why wouldn't you stay in school if you're guaranteed, if you're getting $2 million or whatever for another year, and if you didn't get drafted in the first round, there's no guarantee if you get drafted in the second round in the NBA, correct?
That's absolutely correct, and I think that's why you're seeing some of these kids stay as long as they're staying. I mean, Hammer, I'm thinking, and Ed, hey, if we were in college and we were 7'4" like Edie is, okay, and you were playing 28 basketball games a year, I mean, and getting a few bucks, you go, this is not a bad deal, especially for guys like us. You're walking around campus and going, I think I'll stick around.
And you are the stud on campus because your pictures everywhere, right?
Yeah. Really, it's not only men's athletics. Now it's really women's athletics as well. There's a woman by the name of Caitlin Clark that plays for the University of Iowa.
Right.
And you've probably seen her in a lot of Allstate commercials. She's, she's out there and making, and making a lot of money. And I think that there could have been some middle ground, but the NCAA had you doing nothing for kids and making a lot of money, because this tournament has grown, into being, March Madness is making billions and billions of dollars. And so that.
Well, the interesting thing is the coaches, this started in 1939, correct?
It did, yeah.
And
that's right.
the coaches were running it, right? So
Right.
how did that all change?
Well, it's interesting because the NCAA wasn't the biggest tournament going on. The NIT was the biggest tournament going on. But coaches from around the country decided, let's have a tournament. 9 teams were selected to play, or eight or nine teams geographically, and the University of Oregon won the tournament.
Yeah.
And that's where it started. And all the way up through 1950, it got visibility, but all of a sudden when TV got involved, and that opened up the floodgates. And it wasn't until 1982 that Brent Musburger, who was an announcer, coined the phrase March Madness. And now you can't find too many bars or too many places or too many folks that aren't really into it.
And Brett was huge, man. That guy he had a lot of firsts.
Yeah, no, he's a great announcer. And now every game that's played in the NCAA tournament is on the networks, and the type of revenue that's generated from that. And then you're playing in arenas where it's not, 15,000 people. You're playing actually in football stadiums where there's maybe 46, 47,000 people. I think I told you that in 1978, the ticket to go to the game was $25.
Yeah.
Now it's about $520 to go to a ball game.
That's probably a nosebleed ticket too.
Well, there's, they try to keep the price of the tickets about pretty much the same no matter where you're sitting.
Oh, okay.
So,
oh wow,
there's a tremendous demand for attendance. People want to go to the games, and you're following your team. So if you're from Purdue, there's going to be a slew of Purdue people in Phoenix this week. If you're from Alabama, same thing. And everybody thinks going into the semifinal game that you're winning, the national championship.
Yeah.
And then you have that letdown, like we talked about at Notre Dame when we got beat by Duke. Yeah. deflated. So that's just the way it works. So that's the way athletics works too.
But you got to get your ass kicked one more time in that consolation game.
Well, you did. You did then, and that's probably why they did away with it. I think because they recognized that, hey, this isn't such a great idea. These kids. Because and you even brought it up, Hammer. Like some of these teams have not been there before, and the reason they haven't been there, it's really hard to work your way through a 64-team tournament.
Oh, yeah.
And get there. I mean, Kentucky lost in maybe the biggest upset this year to a really small little school from Michigan, and it should have never happened, but it was a huge upset. Yale University beat Auburn. So there's things that go on in this tournament that make it really exciting for the fan base. It's kind of cool.
So a couple other questions. Who do you think is the best player going to come out of the Final Four this year?
Well, I think there's a couple guys. It's hard to name one particular player, but certainly Edey, who's a 7'4" kid from Purdue, and the guy that played against him last night was 2 nights ago from Tennessee, Kennett. He scored 37 points, made a great reputation for himself. But the interest really right now is on a fellow by the name of Burns, who's about a 6'9" kid from North Carolina and North Carolina State, and he's getting a lot of pub and a lot of recognition as really a premier player.
Okay, guys, last thing. Who do you think, Ed, is going to win the Final Four?
Man, Johnny Foley, I'm going with him. UConn. I'm with Foley.
When Ed mentions Foley's, those are some of our people back in Connecticut. And I worked in Connecticut, as you know, for Yale for 14 years and got to know a lot of the Connecticut people. I think Connecticut is definitely the best team.
Well, they've been there 5 times.
I'm hoping for a Connecticut-Purdue final.
Yeah.
Well, you better say Purdue because your wife is not going to be happy otherwise. So, guys, let us know your thoughts. I'm going to kind of spoil with the Wolfpack.
All right.
And so we got the 2 Connecticut guys and the Wolfpack. Guys, tell us what you think, and we'll catch you next time on Happening Now. Peace out.